Alright, so now since we're given HIDE and we're given this here, since it's a four-sided shape, that's referring to that it's a quadrilateral. It gives us the values or the coordinates for each point. So we could go into the graph and actually graph each point now. Now H is at 214, so this is 2, 14's all the way up here, so there's H. I is at 7, 11. That's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's 10. 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, so I is at 7, 11. So I'd go to 7, and then I'd go up to 11. Follow this guy up. There's 10, so there's 11. So there's I. D is at 11, 1. So 11, 1 is nice and easy because that would, you just have to go to 11 and go up to 1. And so that's D. And then E is at 6, 4. So there's 6, then 1, 2, 3, 4. And there's E. Then you take a straight edge, and that means you use something that is straight. And we're going to connect the points. So that would be the graph. And now we have room to graph the other ones. And if you run out of room, there's graph paper in different locations here. If you need like more later, I'll have more for you. Alright, so we got our graph. So now it says find the lengths of their sides. Well, name the four sides. The first side is HI. That's side number 1. So I'm going to move in here, and I'm going to do this strictly algebraically. And if we do have time, I'll go on to the graph. If not, we'll worry about that a little bit later. But we'll do this algebraically because I think that goes a little bit faster. Now, I gave you the distance formula. Distance formula up there is square root of x2 minus x1. So I have to subtract the x's and I have to subtract the y's. The nice thing is I have to subtract the y's and subtract the x's for slope as well. Now, if you were with me first semester for the first chapter where we talk about distance formula, I show you this way that I kind of work with the distance formula. And I take HI, and what I do is I put the coordinates for H, 214, and then I put the coordinates for I, which are 711. Now, for the distance formula, am I adding or subtracting them? Because these are my x's. These are my y's. So am I adding or subtracting to get for the distance formula? Am I adding the x's or subtracting the x's? Subtracting the x's. And what about the y's? Subtract them. So go ahead, subtract them. What's 2 minus 7? A negative 5. What's 14 minus 11? 3. Now the neat thing about this is you can use these values for slope and distance. For distance, for HI, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these two values and square them. Because that's what we need to do for the distance formula. So for HI, I'm going to square those two. What's negative 5 times negative 5? 25. What's 3 times 3? 9. So HI is equal to, the length of HI is equal to the square root of 34. And you can keep it just like that. Now, if we're going to use these for slope, take the difference of the y, here 3, and the difference of the x, which is negative 5. So there's your slope of HI. Now, also the nice thing is, when you're talking about this, the first side is HI. The second side is going to be ID. So we need to do the same thing for ID. So I'm going to take the point from I, 7, 11, and the point from D, which is 11, 1, and I'm going to subtract them. And I put a little mark there just so I can separate the two. What's 7 minus 11? Negative 4. Be careful about the negatives. The negatives don't mean anything with the distance formula because we're going to square them and it's going to end up being positive anyway. But with slope, it's important. What's 11 minus 1? 10. So ID is going to be equal to negative 4 squared plus 10 squared. Well, what's negative 4 times negative 4? 16. What's 10 times 10? 100. So that's the square root of 116. Now, I can go and get the slope of segment ID is going to be the y value here, which is 10, over the x value, which is negative 4. Can I reduce that? Negative 5 halves. Now you're going to do this for the next side, which is DE. And then you'll do this for the last side, which is HE. And then you find the slope, just like this, of DE and the slope of HE. Now, before we do that, we don't have a ton of time, so I'm going through these so you know how to do every single one. Now it says this next part D here, after you find the slopes, it says name the two diagonals and then find their slopes. Now, the diagonals are going to be X. The diagonals are the segments that connect the points on the interior of whatever quadrilateral we have. So the diagonals are HD and they're IE. And it says find the lengths and slopes of each of these. So now that I know that one of them is HD and the other one I can kind of break them apart here, say that's ID. Here's another way that I actually write that, is I do the XY chart with the points for HD. Now HD, H is 214, D is 11.1. If I subtract these, 2 minus 11, negative 9, 14 minus 1 is 13. I can figure out the length of HD. Which is negative 9 squared plus 13 squared. Which is 81 plus 169, which is a square root of 250. And I can figure out my slope by just taking the 13 divided by the negative 9. And you can rewrite it as like negative 13/9. So it's basically doing the same thing, except for on the graph, you have to identify the two diagonals right here. The two diagonals that are in the center. Now, who remembers the midpoint formula? That's what I kind of thought. Add the x's, divide by 2. Midpoint is going to be like an average. Just if you remember midpoints as averages. We're going to end up doing this. Now for HD, since we're finding midpoints of diagonals, we're going to be working with HD, which is one of my diagonals. You could set up that XY chart again. 214, 11.1, and this time I'm going to add them together. What's 2 plus 11? 13. 14 plus 1 is 15. So my midpoint for HD is just going to be 13 over 2 and 15 over 2. Please turn the phone on silent if you want to keep the phone. It's the second time I heard it go off today. Now for ID, the second diagonal we could do the same thing. Seven 11 is the coordinate from I, and D is 11 1. Add those. Excuse me, and it's not ID, it's IE. That's why I use pencil. 7 11, and then 6 4. 7 plus 6 is 13. 11 plus 4 is 15. My midpoint for IE is going to be equal to that 13 divided by 2, and then that 15 divided by 2. Now this last part says using the information, you're going to want to start looking at what parts are equal, what parts are parallel to each other. Take a look at those two midpoints. Those two midpoints right there. They're the same. So that tells us that midpoints of the diagonals here are the same, which is one of those ideas that we had where we cut the two diagonals in half because that point where they intersect is the midpoint. Now your job tonight, or the rest of the time today and tonight, is to, you got 6 shapes. Start hammering this stuff out. You guys can work together on this. But my plan is by about halfway through the class tomorrow is that you guys have to be done with this. So if you don't finish it tonight, if you don't finish it during the day, you're going to work on it tomorrow and get it done. And then halfway through, we're going to start analyzing the information that we get. So get to work. And